This is Norma, Basalis, Intima. We are starting intracranial structures. We start with anterior cranial fossa. This is the boundary of anterior cranial fossa, this much. This is the middle cranial fossa, the entire boundary of middle cranial fossa. And from here, this is the posterior cranial fossa. So today, let us concentrate on anterior cranial fossa. We start with this median projection. This is a beautiful, see how beautiful it is. It is a beautiful continuation from above, coming from calvaria, that is known as frontal crest. Just below the frontal crest, this is Crista Galli, median projection, Crista Galli. This Crista Galli will continue behind with jugum sphenoidally. This is called jugum, J-U-G-U-M, jugum sphenoidally. On either side of Crista Galli, on either side of this median projection, Crista Galli, we see the cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. If we recollect, before 2 days, the development of this cribriform plate of ethmoid bone was from the trabeculae cranii. Now, on either side of this cribriform plate of ethmoid, we see these swellings. These are the two swellings, and these two swellings are orbital plate of frontal bone. Orbital plate of frontal bone, which are membranous in development. These are purely membrane bones, membranous in development, orbital plate of frontal bone. And you can see here, you can appreciate also all these elevations and depressions. Here also elevations and depressions, here also elevation and depressions. These are corresponding to the frontal lobes of cerebral hemisphere, which has the presence of gyri and sulci. So those gyri and sulci in the brain will correspond with here these elevations and depressions present on orbital plate of frontal bone. Then posterior 1/3, see here, out of this orbital plate of frontal bone, anterior 2/3. Now posterior 1/3 here, if you are able to see this margin, this triangular piece of bone, same here on the right and left, these triangular pieces of bone, they are called lesser wing of sphenoid. These two triangular pieces of bone are called lesser wing of sphenoid, and they are developed from, if you recollect that lecture, development of the skull, they will develop from orbitosphenoid cartilaginous center, from orbitosphenoid cartilage, lesser wing of sphenoid. These two lesser wings of sphenoid are connected in the median plane by jugum sphenoidally, and the pointed projection, you can see this pointed projection posteriorly, just behind the lesser wing of sphenoid. These two pointed projections are called anterior clinoid process. They are called the anterior clinoid process. On this anterior clinoid process, there will be attachment of free margin of tentorium cerebelli, that is one of the folds of dura mater. Tentorium cerebelli, one of the folds of dura mater. Free margin, it is attached here on anterior clinoid process, which is a projection from lesser wing of sphenoid. Then we come back to these two. As I had already told you, this is frontal crest and this is Crista Galli. On both of this, there will be attachment of Fossa cerebri. And this Fossa cerebri will be the fold of dura mater. Just as tentorium cerebelli, fold of dura mater, same way here, Fossa cerebri, fold of dura mater is attached here. Now we come to this portion here, if you are able to see inside, where this brass probe is passing through, a small foramen, and this foramen is called Foramen Cecum. This Foramen Cecum is present between frontal crest and Crista Galli, Foramen Cecum. Through this Foramen Cecum, there will be passing of one nerve, probably a branch of nasopalatine nerve from the nasal mucosa. Then we come back to these two sides, very, very important. Cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. In the cribriform plate of ethmoid bone, why it is called cribriform? because it has so many minute perforations. With your naked eyes you are able to see. So many minute perforations are there. All these are perforations. And these minute perforations will allow the passing of olfactory nerve filaments. The olfactory nerve filaments will pass from the roof of the nasal cavity into the intracranial here through these perforations. And these perforations are present in the cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. Then we come across two canals. Here there will be anterior ethmoidal canal and there will be the posterior ethmoidal canal. On either side of Crista Galli, there will be two canals, anterior ethmoidal canal and posterior ethmoidal canal. From this anterior and posterior ethmoidal canal, anterior and posterior ethmoidal nerves and vessels will pass from the nasal cavity, from the orbit, because the structure which lies below this bone, orbital plate of frontal is orbit. So from the orbit, these anterior ethmoidal nerves and vessels are branches of ophthalmic artery and nerve, and they will pass through anterior ethmoidal and posterior ethmoidal foramen. Once they pass inside, they will pass here in the anterior cranial fossa. Then the anterior ethmoidal nerves and vessels will pass more anteriorly, and as they pass anteriorly, on either side of this Crista Galli, there will be two small canaliculi. And through those two small canaliculi, the anterior ethmoidal nerves and vessels will pass through them into the nasal cavity. So these are the structures present around cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. In exam you may be asked in viva, what are these two structures, cribriform plate of ethmoid bone? What is present? There are many perforations through which the olfactory nerve rootlets will pass. Then what else? What are the other structures? Anterior and posterior ethmoidal canals are there through which anterior and posterior ethmoidal nerves and vessels will pass. And further, the anterior ethmoidal nerves and vessels will pass further forwards anteriorly around the Crista Galli, where there will be the passage to the nasal cavity. So here we finish our anterior cranial fossa.